Hello, good evening from central London. For anyone online and from different platforms, thank you for joining. Obviously, today is a little bit different. Tuesday, we usually do Wednesdays. And listen, I'm excited for today to share with you with regards to build to rent, which, if you're a landlord, of course, you're kind of curious as to what's happening. But if you're a renter or even a buyer in the current market, and you think that doesn't affect you, well, think again, because there are some interesting articles I want to share with you that says otherwise. And so it's a really interesting time in whereby in corporate investors, institutional investors represented a low number of percentage in terms of properties that were owned here in the UK, and that's increasing substantially and at a very quick pace. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, let's look at the data. And of course, I can only interpret the data from my point of view. And it will be interesting always to see your perception and your interpretation, if you have any, and if you're experiencing anything specifically as a renter, buyer, or even a landlord. So, again, we're going to flick through a few articles. But before then, if there's hi, Marta. Good to see you online. And if there's anything that you want us to cover within this topic, but we can digress. Please do feel free to just put it online, and we can definitely cover it. So again, Tuesday here in central London. So first up, let's start with. There's one interesting article, but I couldn't get access with it. But I'm going to share with you whatever I can. Bear with me one sec. Let's start with this one. So, rich investors swoop in as UK squeezes small landlords. So if you're a landlord listening in, whether now or once this is recorded, as you may know, we've had quite a few changes to regulations, legislation, tax changes as well from the government. And yet there is another angle to this whereby landlords, at least small buy-to-let landlords, also have to, let's say, navigate as it becomes increasingly challenging, right? So earlier this year, US private equity firm Harrison Street agreed to finance a £300 million housing development in Birmingham, the UK's second largest city. As we go looking at other articles, we're going to see that London, of course, is very attractive to these investors, and whereby it's becoming a little bit more. Much more attractive as rental increases. And we're going to see behind the scenes as to why that is. Why is it that institutional investors are looking here? By the way, this article is from September. We do have some more recent ones, but just a heads up, this is around about 7-8 months old, but this has accelerated, believe it or not. So while the sector has established itself in Britain over the past decade, a new shift is happening as interest rates rise to levels not seen since before 2008 financial crisis. And why is this important? Why is this important in terms of interest rates and what's happening with the mortgage market with regards to the build to rent sector? Well, and we'll see this in another article. Well, as it becomes more challenging for people to get onto the property ladder, then naturally what happens is people are going to rent more. And what these institutional investors have identified, is specifically single household homes are the ones that seem to be growing in numbers in terms of not being able to get on the property ladder. And so they are taking advantage, for lack of better words, of this situation, and it's going to continue to grow as properties become unaffordable and as mortgage rates have already become rather challenging. They are making the most of this to target these family households for a build to rent. You can see this is a good thing, bad thing. Good thing, why? Well, we're going to see all the amenities that provides. But then if you can afford it, right? The other side of it is if you can't afford it, these build to rent certainly aren't cheap. And we're going to have a look, have a dive into what that looks like in real terms. So let's dive into, this is an interesting one. This is digressing ever so slightly, but as you can see, a lot of these institutional investors are from America. And so I thought this article was quite interesting, which is from last month. Americans are buying up Britain from right under our noses. Here's why. And it just goes into the topics of the different companies that the Americans have taken over. And of course, as I said, we're talking specifically about property, and there's a lot of American money coming into the UK. Yet, if we look at the broader business, we can also see that it's taken over a lot of other companies, a lot of money in the US, and they have their eye on the UK and specifically major cities. I don't know how long ago this was. I'm pretty sure it was Cadbury's that was taken over quite a few years ago. To just share one example, but let's read this. So steadily, the US has taken ownership of thousands of businesses and brands in Britain, including high street shops and manufacturers. If the pace of takeovers ever slackens, it's probably because there is a little left to acquire, and most of the remaining companies are in unprofitable sectors. So again, the big issue, just giving a dig at the Americans taking over businesses here in the UK. So let's see if there's any questions as I move on to talk specifically on the build to rent. Okay, so Danny, what do you think will the presence of corporate investors lead to oversupply and segments of the market? That is an interesting question. And in fact, if we look at Manchester as an example, Manchester also has a huge amount of build to rent. And there has been a lot of conversations with regards to whether that's going to lead to an oversupply. That hasn't happened. And again, I'm talking from a broader perspective as opposed to just build to rent. So a lot of people were quite nervous, quite cautious, even a couple of years ago, whereby they said, this can't be sustainable. Yet what has happened is it's continued to thrive, and demand is outpacing supply. So to answer your question, in the short term, no. In the longer term, that's going to depend completely on based on the employment side of things. Of course, there are other dynamics that affect the housing market, both from selling but also renting. So from an employment side perspective, as long as employment office spaces. So I have a lot of associates and friends in the recruitment industry, but also in the office and commercial space. And we're seeing what I'm hearing, at least, is on the commercial side of things, things are slowing down. So they're certainly not going crazy in terms of committing to very long-term leases. So let's have a look here. So let's look at another article, which is pretty much very similar to the previous one. So the UK build to rent boom, background and key features. So, I mean, build to rent, for those of you that are not familiar with the build to rent, it's been happening for a number of years now, if my understanding is correct, I think more than sort of around 30 years. You got a brief history here in terms of what that looks like. But what I'm especially interested in, and as part of the 2012, okay, so we're going to go through some institutional, some businesses. So who are kind of the big 10 who are taking over. And interestingly, actually, let me bring this up. Let's look at what the build to rent has to offer before going into that. So a variety of homes at different price point. So if you're not familiar with build to rent, it has a lot of amenities. So it's not unusual to see gyms, concierge, even swimming pools actually, uh, that are actually part of the same facility. And that is what they offer in terms of being able to stand out from your usual buy to let, which is what makes it so much more threatening to the individual buy to let investors. In fact, let me just share with you. Okay. This is an interesting article from a landlord today. And this was actually just around about a week ago. So, savage attack on buy to let landlords by build to rent cheerleader. So, this is literally was like a slap in the face to buy to let landlords, right? So, buy to let landlords have been savagely attacked by the country's biggest investment company, which just happens to be a major player in the struggle of build to rent sector. Legal struggling build to rent sector. Legal and general investment management has slammed unscrupulous landlords over claims many are taking people's money and give them bad experience. So um yeah, I'm not sure what to respond to this. I mean, there's certainly landlords out there that don't give value for money, both from a perspective of the condition of the property and also from the experience from a management point of view. But I think in major cities such as London, at least it's been my experience that landlords that do hire a property management company, and those property management, of course, are established and are worth kind of their salt. This is not necessarily true, and this is, of course, taking a dig at build to let, buy to let landlords. Why that is, it could be because they are having challenges from a planning perspective. I was reading another article the other day with John Lewis, and I understand that they are sort of hitting a lot of obstacles and criticizing the government for not being more flexible, whereby they want to provide more homes and they are just in every corner hitting obstacles left, right, and center. So that's always, yeah, interesting to see. Your opinion again? Put a put your comments on the tab and happy to respond. So in recent months, the property industry biggest cheerleaders of buy to let, buy to rent, the British Property Federation and Savills, who jointly monitor the promote sector, have complained about the slow planning system. So yeah, I wasn't wrong. So the planning system is not working in the favor of these big institutional investment companies. Uh, Again, should they be an obstacle? Should the government remove these type of obstacles that are slowing the pace of this industry? So, in addition, the buy to rent trade body has renamed itself as the more consumer friendly Association for Rental Living. That's quite interesting how businesses, big businesses, and especially politicians package something to either promote it or move the perspective of of audience that they want to reach. So let me read. I need to read this again. I'm sorry. So the buy to rent trade body has renamed. So the so build to rent trade body has renamed itself to a consumer friendly Association for Rental Living. It does sound better, right? I'm pretty sure you'll probably agree with that. Um, so LNG, which manages nearly 1 trillion of assets, has built a portfolio of 10,000 build to rent homes in the last 8 years alone, 5,000 of which are occupied, having spent 3 billion on the sector. So we're talking about a huge amount of money. Let's read some of these comments. Actually, I'll be interested, but I'm sure you'll agree, a huge amount of money. So Bill Hughes speaks with the forked tongue. Either that or his mouth is at the wrong end of his body. Alternatively, he may have just played his cards too early and confirmed what many on here feared, namely that ordinary buy-to-let landlords are not wanted. And that is the sentiment that a lot of buy-to-let landlords are getting right now, which is that they are not wanted. Again, if you guys have been following my other lives, you will notice that there are incentives from the government for buy-to-let landlords to sell, or homeowners to sell, but we know it's more towards the buy-to-let landlords. If we look at legislations, regulations, if we look at tax, the taxes that have come along, and how just not viable it's become. If you are just a buy-to-let landlord who just has one property, it's certainly not viable. So you'll probably share this sentiment if you're a landlord, but it will be interesting to find out the renters' perspective. Is this kind of one of those things, as from a renter point of view, tenant point of view, as to Mr. Small Landlord, you had it coming and you should get all that's coming your way, or it'll be interesting to find out. But I'm going to share as to why this will also impact renters as well. So, what do we have here? Okay, what are the trends in the build to rent sector that could influence investment strategy? Okay, so what are the trends? Bear with me one moment, Martha. So, sorry, it just came off my screen. So, what are the trends in the build to rent sector that influence my investment strategy? So, trends, in my opinion, they're going to include. So, there's a lot of focus in sustainability. We're seeing this not only from a commercial perspective, but we're also seeing this in the residential side of things. So, buildings that are built specifically with sustainability, and this includes smart electric and sort of even doors that open and close electrically in this very smart way, sort of fridges and freezers. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Samsung made a partnership, which I want to try and see if I can find that actually. So Samsung build to rent. I'm pretty sure Samsung had a partnership. If my keyboard would work, that would be amazing. Samsung had Connect Living benefits for both landlords and tenants. Yeah. Connected Living benefits for both landlords and tenants. Landlord, developer, builders, and building owners have been using building management software for many years. Yeah. Sorry, digress there for a little bit, Martha. So the answer to your question, sustainability, would be a trend that you definitely want to be looking at to attract tenants, or from a kind of more long-term perspective, and adapting the properties that could be competitive in this area, because give it 10, 20 years, and especially with the EPC, which a lot of landlords believe that they've put that to sleep, but in fact, don't be surprised if, or more so when, that starts to creep back up. I want to share another article with you. This one was very interesting, but unfortunately, let me share this with you from here from my phone. The only reason I'm doing this is because this article was quite interesting. Okay, so can't even see it from my phone now. So this article was from iNews. First-time buyers priced out as Wall Street mega landlords. Let me bring this up. And apologies for how I'm sharing this from my phone, but I'm having some challenge, and it's just a great article that I wanted to share with you. So we've got first-time buyers. First-time buyers priced out as Wall Street mega landlords buy up UK new builds. Private equity firms increasingly investing in the UK rental market, but experts warn this could be disastrous for tenants and buyers alike. So this goes on to say that behind the rise is the family single households, which are struggling to get on to the market to buy properties. And this is, of course, a combination of mortgage rates, but just in general, unaffordable housing. But it says it's a disaster for renters. But what type of renters are they talking about? They're talking about the renters that are struggling to actually pay rent in major cities and just make ends meet. So it's the affordable side of things that they are saying that it's going to be disastrous, because these are not going to be the type of tenants that are going to be able to afford these. They call it luxury properties. This is no longer luxury. No longer going to be able to afford this. And then it says priced out. First time buyers are also going to be priced out. But there's really serious issues, and the first-time buyers is also going to be priced out because these big corporate institutional investors are buying all the properties, and what's left over is going to be not very nice. So they're saying that the people, whether it's buyers or renters, are going to get the crumbs, as it were, because if they're not going to be able to afford these buy to let, build to build to rent properties, because they are expensive. They are slightly above market average rental in these cities, because they do offer much more than your typical buy to let property. But even from a buying perspective, they're also going to be left with crumbs, because most of the property is going to be purchased by investors. So what else do we have here? This is an interesting one. So the negotiator, build to rent houses next big threat to private landlords. Knight Frank says that there has been a huge increase in single family house buildings amid surging renter demand and investor interest, and numbers could triple. So the single family housing rental market is booming and attracted nearly 2 billion in backing last year by investors. So Knight Frank, a single-family house, reports housing could translate to delivery of over 60,000 new SFH rental homes, current valuations. Although still fledgling market, Knight Frank says that it has the potential to play a pivotal role in bolstering housing supply across the UK. Yeah, but for who, right? I guess that's the question. So Jack Hutchison, a partner of residential, in addition, developers and householders are becoming more comfortable with the concept of incorporating single-family housing into their wider sales and marketing strategies, which is helping to accelerate delivery of much-needed housing. So they're putting this as a positive thing, certainly not for private landlords, of course. So what other questions do we have here? So I want to also add to my question about corporate investors. What new housing options will become available due to corporate investments? Not sure I understand this one, Anna Smith. I want to also add to my question about corporate investors. What new housing options will become available due to corporate investments? Well, and luckily I was kind of ahead of your question. So the housing options, most of all, it seems that corporate investors are particularly interested in family sort of household, single household family units. That seems to be where the opportunity lies, and that's going to continue to grow. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so next one. Will corporate-owned rental properties offer competitive amenities and pricing? Well, what I'm seeing is, especially up north, when it comes to working professionals, it's the norm to have a gym. It's the norm to have a concierge, potentially even swimming pool, car park. All of this stuff is actually quite normal to have up there for a working professional, of course. Here in London, I mean, I don't believe that is the norm unless you're kind of, sort of 100K plus, because one of these properties that offers this, I mean, let's use an example of King's Cross, St. Pancras, where you get a lot of professionals who work in the tech industry, or perhaps even students, because I believe that the students are really, the international students at least, are the only ones that can really compete with this tech professionals who earn 100K plus, unless you work sort of with the finance or the legal side of the industry. And a two-bedroom property, as an example, in this area, which I'm not talking about Mayfair, I'm not talking about prime central or super prime central London, Belgravia or anything like that, but certainly prime London. You're looking at a two-bedroom property with a balcony. Let's use Plimsoll Building as an example. N1C postcode, amazing area. St. Pancras Station just next to it. You can be whizzed into sort of mainland Europe through the Euro tunnel, or go to Heathrow or anywhere in the UK. It's very well connected, and the area itself is amazing. So you're looking around about £4,000 for a two-bedroom per week, for a two-bedroom, sorry, per month, £4,000 per month for a two-bedroom property in that area. And I'm not talking about luxury here. I mean, it's in my opinion, at least, it's not luxury. It is definitely premium. And in other areas, you're looking around about 5 to 6 grand for a two-bedroom property like this, especially if you go towards Battersea. So yeah. Also, so let's look at the next one. I'm interested to see such high investment levels in 2023. Does this mean property prices will go up again? Oh, that's an interesting question, Anna. So, does this mean that property prices will go up again? I think we're already seeing property prices holding its own despite the mortgage market, despite political turmoil, and recession, and talks about ongoing recessions and everything else. Property is holding its own, and in parts of the country it's already going up. They're not significant numbers to kind of say, oh, I must buy quickly because the properties are gonna they're gonna go through the roof. No, that's not happening. And we're way, by the way, Anna, we're way a long way away from any potential boom. Certainly not going to happen this year. Next year, also unlikely. Let's see what happens sort of over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. But will this kind of help property prices go up again? I'm not sure is the answer. I would think it will certainly bring up the competitiveness of the quality of properties that are out there, and therefore we also need to look at the segment of the market in terms of which type of properties are we talking about. So from one end, yes, it will increase prices in specific, because let's not forget, real estate is hyper local, right? So if these build to rents are being built in certain neighborhoods which are being regenerated, then that's going to help fuel that regeneration, and that specific hyper local area, then definitely it will help increase prices within that local area. 100% sure. And if you have a property that is similar and competitive to these properties, it's going to help. However, if you have a dated property in a dated building with no amenities, and then everywhere around that, they're building these sort of amazing new builds, then you are going to, from a renting perspective at least, you're going to have to change your target audience. For your target audience that's going to go for that new build is not going to be the same target audience that's going to want your property. And from a selling perspective, the same thing. The target audience that you're looking at won't be looking at that, but it will help keep the value of that property at a good pace. I know this firsthand from experience from properties that I've seen, whereby they have benefited from not necessarily build to rent, but certainly new builds in the area. And these have been actually ex-local properties that have been low rise, very well maintained, and those flats have greatly benefited from the new builds that have happened in the surrounding areas and have increased in rental price and have also increased in sales price. Because if you look at it from a tenant's perspective, what's interesting is they see the whole area and it's great, and they have kind of these little boutique stores, and they have these nice restaurants and coffee shops like Gales and even cinemas. And then suddenly, to buy a one bed flat, I'm going to give you an example. To buy a one bed flat will cost 500,000 or 600,000 pounds in the new builds, but just next door, and this works more for from a buy to let strategy, by the way. And just next door, you have this council flat, okay, or ex-local flat, council flat, which isn't as shiny as this new build, but benefits from all the amenities that are that have been built within this specific area. So from a renter's point of view, and again, I need to be careful with this. From a renter's point of view, someone renting doesn't necessarily care about curb appeal. They get to benefit from the whole regeneration and benefit from everything that's around and the station that's close by. So from a renting point of view, you can definitely win. Long-winded answer, apologies, but I hope that's helpful. I had no idea of the investment buy to. Yeah, so it's big. So there are some more questions here, but I want to go on. What time is it? I'm getting carried away. We're here for a good hour, so we've got 20 minutes left, give or take. Let's have a look here. Whatever articles we have to share with you. This one from Financial Times is an interesting one. I'm not sure if I shared this one already. It's a short one. So why institutional investors are eyeing up private rental sector? Okay. So the UK private rental sector is attracting growing interest from institutional investors with benefits for investors and renters alike. One of the driving forces behind institutional investment, like the likes of Aviva investors. So Aviva investors are legal and general. So again, some of you may not have even known that these guys were in the property industry, and which is why I have said over and over again for the last few years, whereby they say that property is dead, property is no longer a great investment. Well, that's not necessarily true. What's happened is that the rules of the game have changed. And if it wasn't a good investment, trust me, you wouldn't have the likes of this insurance company coming into the property sector. You wouldn't have banks coming into the sector, the likes of John Lewis, who are also building build to rent. You wouldn't have all these big major companies and these institutions from America. Trust me, they know something that you may not know, and hopefully I can share some light into this very growing sector as the UK continues to grow from a rental point of view, because properties are unaffordable, mortgage rates are through the roof, and this is just going to continue to happen, and population is going to continue to grow. If any of you guys have been following me, you will know the stat that I shared, and I've shared it a couple of times already, which is that half the population actually currently lives in urban areas, in urban cities, and therefore what they anticipate is in 2050 that's going to double. So at the moment, if world population is anything like 8-9 billion people and 4 billion already live in urban cities, that's going to double in 2050. Then we're looking at 8 billion people. Now, For those who are smart and want to get ahead of the game, then this is the way. Okay, so the FTSE 100 by contrast was okay. So this is an interesting fact. Listen to this. One of the driving forces behind institutional investment from the likes of Aviva, Investor, and Legal General is the potential scale and the value of the PRS, the private rented sector. It's it is worth 1.4 trillion today, 19% of the UK's 8 trillion housing market. This is the interesting part. The FTSE 100, by contrast, was valued at 2 trillion at the start of January 2023. While the popularity of build-to-rent schemes with institutions has grown rapidly in recent years, less than 1% of the UK housing market is owned by institutions. This leaves huge potential with attractive institutions seeking long-term stable investment opportunities. This is the part that may blow your mind. The potential for substantial growing yield, income, and proportional value elevates the appeal of the UK private rental sector. Rental income, which is broadly likened to wages, is reliable due to its necessity of the product. I'll read that again. The UK's private rental sector rental income, which is broadly likened to wages, is reliable due to the necessity of the product, a home. So that means that it's needed. No, it's like food. One thing that we need is shelter, and we need food. That's never going away. Doesn't matter what AI is doing. Doesn't matter, whatever developments there is in kind of humankind or technology. Shelter and food is something that we're always going to need. Rental demand is growing due to the pressures on the housing. Sorry, I think I've gone here. Yeah. So rental demand is growing due to pressures on the housing market from affordability constraints and population growth. Demographic trends indicate that this growth will continue. So this is the interesting part. As safe as houses. The reliability of residential property values contrasts with the volatility of the stock market. And apologies, but this is the part that I think will blow your mind. The reliability of residential property values contrasts with the volatility of the stock market. For example, the FTSE 100, a trusted, diverse source of value, can fall by 30% in one day. In one day. That's how volatile it is. And to be fair, the FTSE, shares and stock market is known to be actually not that volatile in comparison to other investments, excluding property. So they've been known to fall by 30% in one day. Other direct real estate sectors, such as offices, have fallen by value by 20% in the past year. That is interesting. Has that happened with residential properties in recent years? Haven't seen it happen, and I believe it will. Like other real estate investments, values for private rental sector assets are driven largely by the income they generate. The difference is that demand for homes is non-cyclical, and long-term demand is growing. Will be interesting to find out what your thoughts are on, especially on the last paragraphs of this article. Whether you're watching now or whether you're watching a recording, these are some bold statements, and you can clearly see why this continues to grow. So let's look at any other questions that we have here. How stable will the rental market be with increased corporate presence? It will continue to get. This is, I guess, a very similar question with regards to oversupply, and the rental market will continue to be stable. The important thing here is, Martha, that the stability is also going to be in direct comparison to how competitive your property is. If we're talking about, again, we need to break this down into segments. So if you are talking about stability within the build to rent, I believe it will be very stable, because it's going to become the norm to be able to, at least from a working professional student perspective, it's going to become the norm to expect to demand these type of amenities. So if you're a buy-to-let landlord, then it would be sensible for you to buy properties that can compete with these type of with the type of buildings, and therefore give you the stability from a landlord point of view, at least. I hope that helps. So what else do we have here? Would be great also to know if there will be any improvements in the property management services. But that's interesting because the article from the I've read some articles. So something that you may not know about the build to rent sector. Something you may not know is it does come with some rules, which hopefully, if we have time, I'll share that with you. It does come with some rules and regulations whereby, and quote me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is part of the buy to let, buy build to rent, is that the landlords, these institutional companies, from a government point of view, there are incentives to build these buildings, but they do come with some regulation. And one of them, and again, quote me if I'm wrong, and we're going to review this, whereby the minimum term tenancy that they can give is somewhat somewhere along the lines of 3 years, but the tenant can break after a certain time a period within those 3 years. So it's given kind of a little bit more power to the tenant. And the reason I bring this up to put context into it is that I've read articles whereby once the these landlords tie you into this contract, which fair enough, there is some flexibility, that tenants then find out that the service they're getting from these management companies that manage these build to rent isn't as great as they had initially anticipated. So again, I've not experienced, I can't talk firsthand from it, but that is one thing. From a property management service point of view, from a buy to from estate agencies, they have to up the game. I mean, you can no longer, everyone has to up the game, whether it's a landlord, from a condition point of view, that's what the landlord can control, right? The landlord can control the condition of the property. They can't change the area, they can't change the structure, they can change the condition of the property. Now, if they have an estate agent, then that control passes on to the estate agent to provide the best possible service that they can. Gone are the days whereby you just provide the bad service, take sort of days to respond to a tenant, and of course, fixing stuff is really dependent on contractors and perhaps even head leaseholders and freeholders. But certainly, you do what you can. I hope that answers your question. Excuse me. So let's have a look here. Thanks, Dan. It sounds like a relief if the house prices are holding for the moment. Yeah, they certainly are. They certainly are. There might be a dip in parts of the country, and again, the country is doing sort of different things at different times. I'm an overseas buy to build to rent investor. Do you have an area suggestion where we should be looking at to invest? Oh, I actually have some information here that may be of interest to you, actually. And so bear with me. So I hope this is going to be helpful for you. I was reading this last week. So Manchester is a big one. I'm sure it's no surprise there if you've been sort of following the UK market, known as the Northern Powerhouse City. Again, a lot of people thought that they were going to be oversupplied because the rate at whereby they're building is extraordinary. And yet, what's more extraordinary is to see that demand continues to outstrip the supply. So we have it. In fact, JL predicts that the city will see a 4% rental price growth each year until 2027, and the build to rent market is similarly robust, driven by students, retention, and the city appeal to young professionals. Historically, rental values have surged over 19% in the year leading to June 2023, fueled by the increased demand in rising house prices. So, Anna, Manchester is certainly one to see. And remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be the city centre. So we do have what we call a ripple effect, which is you can start looking at towns that are close to these cities or city centers that are growing and booming. And if you look at neighborhoods or towns that are also just very close by and can share the access to these cities, those are very, very good options as well. Birmingham, I do like Birmingham. I think personally, I like Birmingham more than Manchester, simply because of how close it is to London. That's it. I think it's just more a comfort thing more than anything else. And I was speaking to a family member the other day with regards to getting onto the property ladder. And I think if I went back 25 years ago, I didn't have a family, working, I would. And I want to get the property ladder, given where there is so much remote working offered at this moment in time in the world that we live in. If I didn't have a remote working, I would quit my job and get myself a remote working. And I would go to one of these cities. I am a city person. I'm quite urban. I do like the countryside, yet I do like to be in the city. So I would look at one of these cities which are, substantially low price in comparison to London, and I will move. It doesn't mean I'll say goodbye to London. I love London. And yet, if I have to move for a couple of years so I can get my foot into the property ladder, then that's exactly what I'll do. Alternatively, the other option is, and I shared this with in our other live broadcast as well, which is a lot of young people are deciding not to own their own home. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't own property. They just invest in a property, but they don't want to own their own home. They decide to rent. They like the flexibility. They like, being able to get up one day and say, well, actually, this is where I'm going to move, and I'll just continue renting here or there. It's an interesting world we live in right now. Why not make the most of it, right? I had actually had a chat with a tenant who moved last year. So he had moved to central London during the pandemic, had a great run at having a below market rental, to a point where last year, as the mortgages increased, the landlord was unable to keep that. It was just no longer sustainable, and increased the rent. And the tenant, I'm going to call this person Harold. So Harold turns to me and said, Danny, I work for Spotify. He's an engineer. And Harold says to me, I work for Spotify and I work from home. I'm not sure whether I want to continue paying, $3,000 for a property in central London. It just makes no sense to me. And ultimately, he moved back to his home country, actually, to a major city where he pays substantially less. So he gets to keep most of his salary. Now, again, if you have the option, just that London is so attractive to people who do have the money, it continues to bring in working professionals. So I don't see that slowing down. As long as people have the money, they will continue to come by. I mean, I shared this as well in another article whereby London was named the best city in Europe. And I believe that was for working professionals of some sort. I'll dig that up if you want me to share that with you. So Birmingham, Anna, is another great Another great city to look at. And of course, we have lovely London. London remains the strongest stronghold, remains a stronghold for build to rent in the UK, with 40% of completed developments located in the capital. In fact, the latest figures show that investors spent 2.7 billion on the buy to rent market, build to rent in London alone. And then you got the trends. So I hope that was helpful for you, Anna. So, guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot them across. Otherwise, I believe I have the last article to share with you. So, what is this one? UK residential property, one of the most preferred country sector combination for institutional investors. Excuse me. UK residential property has been ranked as one of the favored sectors for investment according to INREV Investment Intentions, according to the Cedric Booker, CEO at Fund Manager Investments, the rise of UK residential property as a preferred asset class. So yeah, I mean, pretty much sort of just echoing what we've already reviewed, right? And my battery for my Mac. So and if we get cut off, apologies. Otherwise, hopefully we have power. We're back on. So, guys, we are running now out of time. Just a few minutes left. But thank you so much for joining me today. And anyone who's sort of watching this on a recording, please feel free to leave any comments if there's anything there that perhaps you agree strongly on, or maybe you completely disagree. And I don't have any kind of, I won't take it personal. This is information that I interpret based with the resources that I have and based with the experience, but also combined with the day-to-day conversations that I have with buyers, investors, and landlords. So hopefully there is some value for you guys to take away from this. And as always, very grateful for you guys to join me. I had one last article here. City exited London's ends as Londoners look local. Yeah, I mean, I guess this just kind of emphasizes the fact that a lot of people are actually wanting to stay in urban cities. Guys, thank you so much. Much appreciated. You have a great evening and a great week ahead. And I'll see you next week live. But if you do want to find out more, specifically about leasehold and the not renters reform, the leasehold and freehold reform and the most recent developments, make sure you watch and subscribe to the channel because there's some interesting videos coming up. Thank you so much.